Good morning, Nell. How are you today?
What do you mean good morning? It is good evening over here.
Well, I've
Alrighty,
got my tea. You ready to do this?
I
You
am
got
ready to
yours?
do this. I have my rooibos tea as well. Let's do it. So, welcome everybody. I can't believe we are finally here. It's our first episode of Tea and Tales. Can you believe it, Sarah?
I can't. I'm Sarah. This is Nell, and we are talking today about who dis.
Who
Who
dis?
are we anyway?
That is a good question. Who are we, Sarah?
Who
It
are
all
we?
started in 1964. No, I'm not that old.
Whoa. I think it started in 2020.
I feel that might be more accurate.
So in 2020, Nell and I joined a writers group together.
Yeah,
And
pitched to
within this group,
published.
there were pitched to published, and we have inside that group afternoon for us, morning for the United States calls,
Writing Satan. Writing sessions. Oh my goodness.
writing sessions. Yes,
There we go.
we met great people in those writing sessions, especially a guy named Edward. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Edward is fantastic, and he's been helping us along this whole time. But he'd join in while me and Nell were just sitting there chatting because it was just us.
True. And what better way to not write so than talk to each other? Procrastination, hashtag.
Yeah. He'd just be sitting there sipping his morning tea and doing what he does. We're like, Edward, we're sorry, we're boring. He's like, no, no, you guys are interesting. I love listening to you.
Right? And then he came up with the idea and he was like, you two should start a podcast. And then it's that typical like, yeah, we should start. No, we're not gonna do that. That that doesn't sound it's like something we would do.
And besides, Edward, we're supposed to be writing, like not talking right now. So you need to tell us to quit talking so we can all get some work done.
Yes, he should have pulled a Claire on us and be like, crack on, people, crack on.
You should jump in and be like, how long have you been talking? It's like been half an hour.
Exactly. Yeah, so then actually like a few months went by and we just kind of, not months, like, yeah, a few months, I think. And we just kind of continued writing and continued talking nonsense and continue cracking on, as Claire would say. And then the one day, was it you that said to me, you know what, we should really do a podcast? And I was like, you know what, maybe we really should do a podcast. What
It
better
was about a
way,
year ago. I was like, we should take Edward seriously, take him up on this.
right? Little did I know how much goes into actually starting a podcast. Ah. But yes, so then we kind of started thinking about it and started like doing a little title. What title are we going to use? What like episodes are we going to do? What are we going to be talking about? And so, what did we decide, Sarah? What is this podcast going to be about?
We settled on tea and tales, sipping on romance, fantasy, and writing because that's who we are. That's what we do. Nell is
Yeah, I'm a
a
romance
fantasy
writer,
writer.
and
I'm a
Sarah is a
fantasy
fantasy.
writer. You're a
Yes.
romance. Sorry, I got it backwards.
You know what? I feel there's a lot of fantasy in writing romance, so I don't think you're very wrong. So yes,
What do
so
you like?
this.
What do you like reading in your fantasy romance? Do you like to read and write?
What's that? Ooh, is it going to make me sound cliche if I say the Akatar series? I feel that's going to make me sound very cliche, but I think that was actually one of the first fantasy novels that I've read, which then kind of led me to Fourth Wing. Other than that, I actually haven't read a lot of fantasy, a romantasy. Gosh darn it. I shall get it right. I mean, number one stuff that I do read is romance. Love my contemporary romance novels. Do read my historic romance novels. I have one author that I will read paranormal romance from, but that's just one author, and it's Christine Feehan. Because I don't know what she does. I don't know what magic she puts in her words, but somehow it just works. And I'm just like drawn to her pages. Also, like if you read a romance novel, 350 pages, like that is the sweet spot. If you make me start reading 400 pages, I'm like, I could have been 50 pages into a new book, like honestly. But her pages, she would be like up to 450, 500 pages. And I'm just like, oh, this is nice. Like, why is it so short? I'm like, what's this? Then I feel like you know what you're doing. So
when you have
isn't
good
it
writing, it doesn't matter how long it is, you just love it.
right? So yeah, and then actually I do sometimes read mystery, cozy mystery, crime novels. Sometimes I do slip into young adult. I read like The Inheritance Game and of course, Divergent and those type of novels. Once in a blue moon. Once in a blue moon. And that is if I maybe got hit on the head and fell onto this book. I would read like women's fiction. So I have dipped my fingers into different genres. But what do you read? What do you like to read?
Well, I will have to admit I have read one romance novel in my entire life.
Calm down. That's too many. Calm down.
Hey, I got one in. I tried it. I really did. I like a good romance subplot, but I definitely prefer the fantasy and the sci-fi. My favorite sci-fi book that I've ever read is called The Icarus Hunt by Timothy Zahn, published back in 1999, but it's to this day my favorite book. I will recommend it to anybody and everyone.
Okay.
But yeah, most recently I've been reading a lot of Brandon Sanderson. Who doesn't when you love high fantasy, though? I've also discovered N.K. Jemisin. She's a fantastic writer, high fantasy writer. Enjoy her to death. But they're like big names. Those are some big writers. And we don't often read the big writers when we're trying to figure out what's coming out right now, what sort of new books are coming out right now. So right now, I'm actually reading a book called Empire of Exiles by Aaron Evans.
Ooh.
That I'm enjoying. I've been reading a lot of newer fantasy and sci-fi authors, mostly fantasy, because I write mostly fantasy.
And it's very important to actually read in the genre you're writing because, as you know, and as I know, if you want to do traditional publishing and you want to get an agent, then you have to write a query letter. And in your query letter, you have to have comp titles, which is kind of, you have to comp the titles that your genre is in.
And so you have to know what titles are out there. I was actually just having a conversation last night with a writer friend of mine who's just getting into the query trenches. He wants to start putting stuff out. And he was like, what is a good comp title? And I was talking to him about how you have to read what's coming out now by authors who write on your level. Not the big guys who get sales because they have a name, but people who are just starting like us. We have to know who they are, have to know what's going out there. And so I read a lot of those kinds of books, a lot of the debut novels, or it's their second or third book sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Between actually writing and reading, I feel like writers have full-time jobs as well, which is so hard to juggle. And I think that's also why we kind of want to do this podcast, because I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed because they think that I don't spend enough time writing, and you have these other writers that write new novels every 3 months, but I have this and I have that. And this is just, I want to say, almost like a community for all writers and all readers and all people involved in the literary world, to say that, you know what, it is okay. You are not alone. You are not the only one who has a 9-to-5 job and then have to squeeze in an hour at 5 a.m. in the morning to be able to get your 200 words, which felt like writing 1,500 words in.
Yeah, we still have to have day jobs. We still have to raise children. We still have to do all those things.
Feed ourselves.
And learn all the buzzwords and understand an industry that isn't our day job most of the time. Mm-hmm. So we want to be able to help people understand what do we mean when we say these terms, and what do other people mean? What does it look like to an agent and to a publisher? What does it look like to publish yourself, to be an indie publisher? How does that happen? How can you succeed doing that? We want to throw out resources, but we also want to bring in people who know more than us, because we're still learning too. Because we want to make this a community, people can put in, hey, you talked about this in this episode, and here's a fantastic resource I found for this.
Yeah, no, very true. Because we did join a writers community where we have learned a lot of things, but I always say you can never know enough. So we as writers always want to know more. So it's always great when we can connect with people that know more than we do or know less than we do. And we could be like, you know what? I've been there. Let me show you.
Let me show you the way.
Exactly.
Well, we want to keep our episodes short and simple here at Tea and Tales, because we want you to get those pens back on the paper, get your fingers back on the keyboard, and get writing while you have the time to write.
Absolutely. And if you like what we are doing, if you want to hear more about what we are about and the people that we'll be having on our podcast, you are more than welcome to go and follow us on Instagram at Tea and Tales Podcast, on Facebook at Tea and Tales Podcast. You can see how original we are with our wording here, and on X or Twitter at Podcast Tea Tales. And if you like us and you want to set us up to the top, then you can go onto your Apple Podcast purple icon, and then you can like our podcast. You can comment on it, because we just love to talk to you. We love to connect with you.
Absolutely. And share with all of your friends and anyone who wants to be a writer or is a struggling writer just like us. Happy writing.
Bye.